Chapter 5 of The Film Mystery. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Roger Moline. The Film Mystery by Arthur B. Reeve. Chapter 5. An Emotional Maze. Bernie proved to be as stupid a youth as any I had ever seen. He possessed frightened, semi-liquid eyes and overshot ears, and hair which might have been red beneath its accumulation of dust. Without doubt the boy had been coached by the electrician, because he began to affirm his innocence in similar fashion the moment he entered the door. "I don't know nothin', honest I don't," he pleaded. "I was out in the hall, I was, and I didn't come in at all until the doc came." "I suppose you were anxious to see if the cable was becoming hot," Kennedy suggested gravely. "That's it, sir. We was looking at it because it was on the varnish, and the butler, he says—" "Where's the locket?" interrupted Kennedy. "The one Miss Lamar wore in the scenes." "Oh," in disdain, "that thing." With some effort Bernie fished it from the capacious depths of a pocket, disentangling the sharp corners from the torn and ragged lining of his coat. I glanced at it as Kennedy turned it over and over in his hands, and saw that it was a palpable stage prop, with glass jewels of the cheapest sort. Concealing his disappointment, Kennedy dropped it into his own pocket, confronting the frightened Bernie once more. "Do you know anything about Miss Lamar's death?" "No, I don't know nothin', honest." "All right." Kennedy turned to McKay. "Warner, the director." Of Stanley Warner I had heard a great deal, through interviews, character studies, and other press stuff in the photoplay journals and the Sunday newspaper film sections. Now I found him to be a high-strung individual, so extremely nervous that it seemed impossible for him to remain in one position in his chair or for him to keep his hands motionless for a single instant. Although he was of moderate build, with a fair suggestion of flesh, there were yet the marks of the artist and of the creative temperament in the fine sloping contours of his head and in his remarkably long fingers, which tapered to nails manicured immaculately. Kennedy seemed to pay particular attention to his eyes, which were dark, soft, and amazingly restless. "Who was in the cast, Mr. Warner? What were they playing, and just exactly what was each doing at the time of Miss Lamar's collapse?" "Well," Warner's eyes shifted to mine, then to McKay's, and there was a subtle lack of ease in his manner which I was hardly prepared to classify as yet. "Stella Lamar was playing the part of Stella Remsen, the heroine, and I see your associate has the script." He paused, glancing at me again. When Kennedy said nothing, Warner went on, growing more and more nervous. "Jack Gordon plays Jack Daring, the hero, the handsome young chap who runs down the steps and encounters the butler and the maid in the hall just outside the library." "Wasn't it his face in the French windows of the library at the same time?" Kennedy asked. "Wasn't he the murderer of the father also?" "No." Warner smiled slightly, and there was an instant's flash of the man's personality, winning and, it seemed to me, calculated to inspire confidence. "That is the mystery. It is a mystery plot. While the parts are played by Jack in both cases now, we explain in a subtitle a little later that the criminal himself, the Black Terror, is a master of scientific impersonation, and that he changes the faces of his emissaries by means of plastic surgery and such scientific things, so that they look like the characters against whom he wishes to throw suspicion. So while Jack plays the part, it is really an accomplice of the Black Terror who kills old Remsen." Kennedy turned to me. "A new idea in the application of science to crime," he remarked dryly. "Just suppose it were practicable." "The Black Terror," Warner continued, "is played by Merle Shirley. You've heard of him, the greatest villain ever known to the films? Then there's Marilyn Loring, the vampire, another good trooper too. She plays Zelda, old Remsen's ward, and it's a question whether Zelda or Stella will be the Remsen heir. Marilyn herself is an awfully nice girl, but oh, how the fans hate her." The director chuckled. "No Millard story is ever complete without a vamp, and Marilyn's been eating them up. She's been with Manton Pictures for nearly a year." "You played the millionaire yourself?" "Yes, I did old Remsen." I realized suddenly for the first time that Werner was still in the evening clothes he had donned for the part. On his face were streaks in the little make-up that remained after his frequent mopping of the features with his handkerchief. Too, his collar was melted. I could imagine his discomfort. "Do you have any business with Stella?" Kennedy asked, using the stage term for the minor bits of action in the playing of a scene. "Did you move at all while she was going through her part?" "No, Mr. Kennedy. I was dead man in all the scenes." "Show me how you lay, if you will." Obligingly, Werner stretched out on the carpet, duplicating his positions even to the exact manner in which he had placed his hands and arms. Rather to my own distaste, Kennedy impressed me to represent, I am sure in clumsy fashion, the various positions of Stella Lamar. Most painstakingly, Kennedy worked back from the 13th scene to the first, referring to the script and coaxing details of memory from the mind of Werner. I grasped Kennedy's purpose almost at once. He was endeavoring to reproduce the action which had been photographed, so as to determine just how the poison had been administered. Of course, he made no reference to the tiny scratch, and McKay and I were careful to give no hint of it to Werner. The director, however, seemed most willing to assist us. I certainly felt no suspicion of him now. As for Kennedy, his face was unrevealing. "When the film in the camera is developed," I suggested to Kennedy suddenly. He silenced me with a gesture. "I haven't overlooked that, but the scenes will be from one angle only and in a darkened set. I can determine more this way." Somewhat crestfallen, I continued my impersonation of the slain star, not altogether willingly. Soon Kennedy had completed his reconstruction of the action. "Who else entered the scene besides Gordon?" he asked. "The butler and the maid, after the lights were flashed on." "I'll question the cameramen," he announced. "Who are they?" "Harry Watkins is the head photographer," Werner explained. "He's a crackerjack, too, one of the best lighting experts in the country. Al Penny's grinding the other box." "Let's have Watkins first." Kennedy nodded to McKay to escort the director from the room. Neither Watkins nor Penny were able to add anything to the facts which Kennedy had gleaned from Manton and Werner. When he had finished his patient examination of the junior cameraman, he recalled Watkins and had both, under his eyes, close and seal the film cartridges which contained the photographic record of the 13 scenes. Dismissing the men, he handed the 2 black boxes to McKay. "Can you arrange to have these developed and printed quickly, but in some way so neither negative nor positive will be out of your sight at any time?" McKay nodded. "I know the owner of a laboratory in Yonkers." "Good. Now let's have the leading man." Jack Gordon immediately impressed me very unfavorably. There was something about him for which I could find no word but sleek. Learning much from my long association with Kennedy, I observed at once that he had removed the make-up from his face, and that he had on a clean white collar. Since the linen worn before the camera is dyed a faint tint to prevent the halation caused by pure white, it was a sure sign to me that he had spruced up a bit. I knew that he was engaged to Stella. Here in this room she lay dead, under the most mysterious circumstances. There was little question, in fact, that she had been murdered. How could he, really loving her, think of such things as the make-up left on his face or his clothes? I had to admit that he was a handsome individual. Perhaps slightly less than average in height, and very slender, he had the close-knit build of an athlete. The contour of his head and the perfect regularity